much for taking time out of your busy lives and schedules to join us. I'm Sean Stevenson from Sport and Rec Victoria. I've just recently, not so recently, a few months ago joined Sport and Rec Victoria following the parliamentary inquiry into autism services. And as part of that, part of our response is to increase participation opportunities for children with autism. Myself, I've been in the field of autism and disability since 2003, where I started working in Canada before moving to Bermuda, Bahrain, Thailand, and then coming to Australia to join Autism Victoria. Well, that was an amazing opportunity because I got to see how autism was viewed across very different cultures, different religions, and different countries. And 100% what binds everyone together is sport and recreation. And so we could work our butts off doing speech therapy and OT, but if a child who didn't have any verbal language could kick a soccer ball, roar like a dinosaur, or bark like a dog, they could automatically sort of have friends on the playing field. Of course, tonight we're not just talking about sport and rec, but something a little bit more important, of course, is wandering, water safety, and well-being. Just before we get into it, I would like to of the land on which we meet today. So the parliamentary inquiry had 101 recommendations, 2 are specific to Sport and Rec Victoria, and from that, I've been hired, so I suppose I'm recommendation 10.8. Following, the timing couldn't have been better. I just finished my master's with AFL Victoria at Deakin University, focused on how we can increase access to AUSKIC for children who are developmentally vulnerable. And then recommendation 10.7, expand the Access All Abilities program. So our Supporting Victoria Sport and Recreation program, we invest just over $7 million in sport and recreation to increase participation opportunities for women and girls, called Aboriginal, and almost half, just over $3 million is invested in the Access All Abilities program across the state. Ben Carbonaro is someone, him and I go back to 2011. I met him during World Autism Awareness Day. And if you've ever heard the stereotypes that people with autism don't like to talk, or they're not that funny, you haven't met Ben yet. Ben loves to talk, and he's the perfect person to be your MC tonight. Thank you, Ben.
Please excuse me if I do look a bit half asleep. I've been up since 4 o'clock this morning with the Cox Plate barrier for ordering breakfast this morning, so please excuse that. Thank you very much for your warm welcome, Sean. So what are we here about tonight? We're here to talk about autism, wellbeing, wandering, and water safety. And I think sometimes as people with autism, like myself for example, we don't have good depth perception and we don't really care about that kind of stuff. We probably should, and I'm sure Erica will touch on that a lot later. Erica is...
it's Kieran first.
Yeah, I know, I'm going to get to that. Slow down, it's okay. What's going on with you today? This is hilarious. So Erica is co-founder, is the founder of Autism Swim. Basically with Autism Swim, it's teaching about swimming in autistic kids, but more about like correct depth perception, how to deal with them in other situations around water and that kind of thing. Am I right in saying that?
Yeah, very, very much on the money, yeah.
You didn't even have to look at that.
Look at you, you've done your research.
And then we've also got Kieran Thorpe, who's the co-founder and director of the Wellbeing Project. His area of practice and research is the field of neurodevelopmental conditions such as autism, Asperger's, and ADHD. A lot of his research is brought first, so we're very privileged to have you here tonight. Then, without further ado, we've got Lana Wheatfield coming to speak to us tonight. Lana and I go back a little bit through like a network, I think, on a camp we met.
Yes, I think so.
A little while ago now. And we're going to hear about some real lived experiences as a person with autism, but also about your Ponsonby Day qualification too. So looking forward to hearing all the guest speakers tonight. Let's call Kieran up first.
Can you guys hear me? Yes, right. I won't use the microphone. That's all good. Yeah, my name is Kieran, and it's a pleasure to be here to talk about my research in regards to autism and the relationship to wellbeing. I've been working with children, adolescents and adults with autism for 11 years now, and did my Bachelor of Health Science, my graduate diploma, started a PhD, which I'm still continuing at the moment, sort of stopped my research and submitted a Masters of Science, which was looking at autism and wellbeing, and saw this big gap, I guess, in regards to GPs and health professionals, that they needed upskilling in regards to autism, but that in the community and health professionals as well, and parents, that we also need to translate some of the knowledge in regards to wellbeing as well. So it's a pleasure to be here. So, I'm based at Deakin University at the Australian Centre of Quality of Life and the Deakin Child Study Centre. And since 2001, Deakin University has been measuring the wellbeing of the Australian population. And the data set sits over 60,000 participants, which is a huge representative sample. And from that, we've got some very strong data in theory. Now, from this, and I guess my experience working with people with autism, is about 5 years ago I noticed that the literature, in the scientific literature, was still suggesting that autism was a pathology, that it was a disorder. No one was really addressing well-being. So I took this opportunity to go, well, we've got this great information in regards to the Australian general population. How does it actually apply to people with autism, and what information can we find out? So the first question is, well, what is well-being? And it's a buzzword that is used in the community, but as a researcher, it plays a very important role in what we mean in regards to well-being. And there's two aspects. The first is emotions. So I'll talk a little bit about emotions. And the second aspect is mood. So in our day-to-day life, emotions are going to fluctuate. So you may have woken up this morning and you may have felt tired, you may have woken up and you may have felt happy. Throughout the day, you might have felt hungry, you might have been angry at your boss, your child might have been angry as you as a parent. So these emotions are going to continually fluctuate. Now, so the first question is, well, what is well-being? And it's a buzzword that is used in the community, but as a researcher, it plays a very important role in what we mean in regards to well-being. And there's two aspects. The first is emotions. So I'll talk a little bit about emotions. And the second aspect is mood. So in our day-to-day life, emotions are going to fluctuate. So you may have woken up this morning and you may have felt tired, you may have woken up and you may have felt happy. Throughout the day, you might have felt hungry, you might have been angry at your boss, your child might have been angry as you as a parent. So these emotions are going to continually fluctuate. Now, emotions are always related to an event. So we can always pinpoint someone's emotion related to an event that has occurred. Now, from a psychological point of view, this is important because we can implement some psychological therapy. If someone, for instance, might be experiencing some low mood because of certain events that have occurred. But there's also this other aspect, which is mood. And as a wellbeing researcher, this is something that we're very interested in. Now, mood is like your body temperature. Your body temperature sits at about 36 to 37 degrees. And you know that if your body temperature gets too hot, you're going to feel very warm. And if your body temperature gets too cold, you're going to notice that. And so if your body temperature is getting hot, we know that you sweat to cool down, and that if you're too cold, that you're going to shiver. In regards to our mood, we measure it on a 0 to 100 point scale. And what's really surprising is that our mood actually fluctuates between 70 to 90 points on this scale. So as your emotions are fluctuating through the day-to-day, your mood is sort of changing between 70 to 90 points. How do we measure mood, or how do we measure well-being? We've got a number of different domains that we look at. The first one is standard of living. With standard of living, these are, I guess, your basic needs, that you've got a house, you've got access to food, the basic data. And then below 50 points, we know that a person is very likely to be depressed and in need of support. Now, I forgot to mention at the start of this talk, the research that I did in regards to the general population and the autism population, all this theory is actually the same. There was no real difference between people with autism and people without autism, which is really exciting from my point of view. So, I promise this is the most advanced researchy based slide I have in the presentation. I'm known for sometimes putting too much stats and data in. So I've tried really hard to make sure I haven't included that today. So what we can see here is that we've got a person's set point range, which is between 70 and 90 points. Now we know if someone goes above 90 points, they've probably won the lottery. They're very, very happy. But you can't stay at that happiness level. You will come back down to each person has a set point range, which for most people sits around at 80 points. We know that, as we all do in our day-to-day lives, that there are stresses, and that your well-being is probably going to be reduced below that 80 points, and it's going to hover probably around 70 or above 70 points. Now, it's really hard for well-being to drop below 70 points, and this is due to a homeostatic system. So just like your body temperature is staying between that 36 to 37 point range, and you'll sweat if you're too hot and you'll shiver if you're too cold, there are psychological processes that prevent you from going below 70 points. And once again, the research that I conducted found that this is the same for people with autism. However, and I'll explain those protective factors in a moment, however, if the stresses are chronic or quite large, then your well-being will fall below 70 points, and it will fall very quickly. So when that happens, we've got to try and capture someone before they actually fall below that 60-point threshold. So what keeps us happy, or what keeps us above 70 points? The first psychological mechanism that is actually employed is self-esteem, and that is, I'm a person of self-worth. So things like, I may have failed my maths test today. You might reinterpret that as, well, I may have failed my maths test, but I'm still good at school. So we see a lot of language where a person is going to reinterpret that and bring in self-esteem. Things like using optimism. I know the challenge is really hard right now, but I know tomorrow is going to be a better day. Or I can see that in the next few days it's going to be better. Perceived control. Now, it's really hard to measure if someone's actually got control in their day-to-day life, so we measure perceived control. And people need to feel that they are in control of their own life. If we take that away, then we notice well-being fall very quickly. But things like, you could be annoyed at your boss because they've told you to complete a task, but you could use perceived control in how you're going to manage that task, or the control that you're going to do with that task. Money is plays an interesting role. We know that having a household income above $30,000 will get you just over 70 points. There isn't actually much difference. There are some significant differences, up to about $100,000. So a household income of $100,000 will get you up to about the 80-point range. But anything above $100,000, we see no difference. We don't see anyone actually going above 80 points. Personal relationships is one of the strongest protective factors for well-being. And this is more or less, you've got that person to call upon, you've got that person to talk to, you've got that person who can provide support. And so having a close personal relationship is one of the strongest protective factors. And then also feeling like you are achieving, that you have a purpose and that you're achieving your goals. So one of the things I did in my research was I asked 210 parents who had adolescents with autism, and I asked the parents, I want you to rate your child's well-being on those 7 domains that I talked about. And what was really interesting was that the parents' overall wellbeing score came in at 55 points. So parents were indicating to me that they think that the child's wellbeing or the adolescent's wellbeing is actually quite low. And to me that's suggesting, oh, maybe we've got to bring in some serious intervention to these children. However, I asked the adolescents as well. And I said, and I made sure that I tried to make it as clear as possible that parents couldn't interfere with their adolescents filling out the data. And this is what the adolescents reported. Yeah. So overall, the adolescents' wellbeing score came in at 72 points. So it tells us that they're functioning quite well. What I found really interesting was the discrepancy here between community, the sense of community. Anecdotally, it seemed like school played an important role, and also online, being part of this, a bit of an online community. Relationships was an area where they're still sort of tending to underreport. Standard of living's fine, health appears to be fine, achieving looks quite well, but yeah, very interesting. So, and it's actually not surprising, parents will underreport their child's well-being, whether they've got an intellectual disability, a chronic health condition, or whether it's just your everyday teenager. And in fact, parents will report that their partner's well-being is actually much lower than what their partner will report. So we will always rate someone's well-being generally to be worse. So some interesting findings there. Now, I do put a caveat on it. We do expect that adolescents would actually probably be more at the 80 point range, and because the adolescents are sort of sitting down in that 72 point range, it is indicating that we do still have a higher percentage of adolescents with autism, probably in that depression zone. But overall, parents are tending to underreport their child's well-being. So overall, supporting personal relationships and achieving in life are probably the strongest things that we can do to support a person with autism's well-being. One of the things I like about community organisations such as like Lifesaving Victoria, or whether it's your basketball club, is that you can foster those personal relationships. They can provide meaningful connections. We can also, through your events, can also bring in that achieving in life, or that purpose and that drive, provided that's what the person wants to do. Provided that they want to be there and they want to do that and they see that as value. So I think coming here tonight, Lifesaving Victoria, Victorian government putting this event on is fantastic. Helping community organisations understand disability, providing coaches or support staff with resources that they can use to make it inclusive environments, and I think we're well on the way to supporting people's well-being. So with that, I have, in the middle of doing research and working on my own business called the Wellbeing Project. The website will be out probably in 2 weeks, but at the moment you can put your email address on there, and when we're up and running, I can contact you and tell them that we're up there and running. So thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen.
Any thoughts, Ben?
Yeah, I just wanted to say I thought that I genuinely myself and I think I'm pretty well read. That's hit out of the ballpark because I've learned so much from that.
I think
And you talked about money and stuff too. Like I know a lot of money myself. what I probably like sometimes give off the impression like, do I have a lot of money? You don't have to have money to be happy. Like, they say money makes you happy, but that proves it doesn't.
Yeah.
So that's just one major point I sort of took out of that.
Thank you. Thank you.
Yeah. What do you everyone else get out of it?
We'll have some questions and answers in a little bit.
Sure.
But if I can barge in and say my point, why not? I think, I do ask myself, what is our ultimate goal with sport inclusion and recreation, of course. And I guess the same, I've benefited from sport and rec, lifelong friendships. As Ben said, we might not make that much money, but the personal connections that we can get from sport and rec, whether it is surf lifesaving or nippers, or it's footy or tennis or golf, is incredible. So hopefully we can have welcoming and safe environments for more people, whether they have autism or cerebral palsy, or maybe they're in a wheelchair or have intellectual disabilities. So thank you.
And next up, we've got Eric Gleason from Autism Swim. Welcome.
Thank you, everyone. Do I need a microphone? Some are saying yes and some are saying no. I'll project a bit louder. Just as a bit of context for you, I'm a behaviour specialist of about 10 years, with wandering being one of my main referral issues. And a couple of years ago, I stumbled across the drowning statistics pertaining to those who have autism. We'll talk a little bit about those shortly. But I was just deeply disturbed by those and thought, I've been doing this for 8 years and didn't know those stats. I wonder who else doesn't know them. Started to chat with people, realised it's this huge black hole that no one knows about, so as a result, no one talks about it. I became desperate for all of the individuals I support to engage in swimming services. Started to approach all my local swim centres, and they were saying, look, we would love to take these individuals on, but we just have failure after failure after failure. So thanks, but no thanks, basically. And I said, look, if I help you, if I provide you with training and resources and support, will you take them on? And they said yes. As a result, and purely by accident, Autism Swim was born. I'm going to talk through a couple of the issues that pertain to wandering and drowning in the wonderful population group of autism and intellectual disability. I have been told I have around about 2 to 3 times the amount of slides that I'm supposed to.
Stewards inquiry.
I have a few issues with culling, so I am going to have to move through quite quickly. And the harsh reality is that we're probably not going to get through all of my wonderful slides. So please let me know if you actually want a copy of the PowerPoint, and I can just distribute it to you. So just a little bit about Autism Swim. We're now international, and we're water safety and swimming specialists for individuals with autism spectrum disorder and other abilities. We're a multidisciplinary organisation offering highly specific training, support, consultancy and resources to all of the relevant stakeholders. So that's swimming instructors, aquatic therapists, parents, not-for-profit, surf lifesaving clubs, and most importantly, the individuals themselves. Our aim is to mitigate the risks associated with wandering and drowning in the ASD population group, with fun being at the forefront of everything we do. So it's a super heavy message, and so we really need to balance it out and reach our goals through making sure everyone has a good time along the way. We're just going to watch a quick clip that was put together by SBS, which sheds a little bit of light on this area.
They are so drawn to the water, it's just so hypnotic for them, so enticing.
He enjoyed the water, the feel of the water. Nothing else mattered to him while he was in the water.
Children with autism are 160 times more likely to drown than the general paediatric population group.
Ready, walk, in. Do you like swimming? Ayla was diagnosed when she was 18 months old, and at the initial diagnosis she was diagnosed as severely affected by the autism. Her body's relationship to movement was something that was really, really frightening. Like, she'd find being in a stroller frightening, she'd find being in a shopping trolley frightening, and one of the things that really helped support her was water.
Ayla is our little fearless warrior. I'm Erica Gleeson, the Clinical Director of Autism Swim. Autism Swim is a national organisation that specialises in water safety and swimming skill sets for autism spectrum disorder and cognitive deficit.
Before the Autism Swim program, we did try to get Ayla involved in a mainstream swimming school, and we just found that it didn't consider her needs. She started to stop liking the water.
Swimming instructors, until Autism Swim came along, didn't really have the opportunity to be equipped with training and consultancy and resources that allow them to most effectively teach to the ASD brain. A lot of individuals with autism have difficulties in perceiving risk and danger.
I had remembered seeing on the news a couple of times that some kids on the spectrum had escaped their homes and ended up subsequently drowning. But you don't think that it's that prevalent.
Thanks, Erica.
Oh, thank you.
No, thank you.
Yes. 50% of individuals with autism will wander. They generally gravitate toward bodies of water.
Connor was always happy. He was just always happy.
Smiling all the time, laughing. You wouldn't even know that he was different or anything like that.
He was nowhere in the room. We went through the whole room, and then somebody noticed that the fly screen of the window was out. We're running up and down the street, and my brother's knocking on people's doors at 7 in the morning, waking everybody up and saying, "Oh, have you seen this little boy? Have you seen this little boy?" And then Dave found one of his little toys that he played with sitting on the bank of the river, and we called the police.
Police turned up and
One of the police officers came over and told us that the volunteer divers had found him. Everything was different.
it was quiet. That was the biggest thing, just silence in the house. Just silence, because he would always be making a noise or humming.
We've got this little 3-year-old who, she loved her big brother. She didn't understand.
Still sort of doesn't
No, she
understand
doesn't get it.
to this day. She thinks that he's just gone away and is coming back.
90% of individuals with autism who are under 14 who die, it's a result of drowning. I'm yet to tell one person that statistic and they know, which is the way that this organisation came to be. Dippers is a bit of a circus down on the beach. It's a fun circus though. So generally the first half of the program is sand-based. We look at some fine motor skills and gross motor skills on the sand, and a lot of the activities there are simulating things that would actually happen within the water. Some of the skills that the participants walk away with are the ability to perceive risk a little bit better, being able to identify flags, for instance, where they should be swimming, who they should be swimming with.
Her ability to assess dangerous situations, particularly in the water now, has certainly improved.
We would love to see swimming lessons for individuals with autism be compulsory. Ultimately, the work that we're doing is saving lives. That's why we're here. So we need to continue to generate exposure, we need to offer services to more individuals, and we need to do everything that we can to move those statistics in another direction.
Pretty heavy. In terms of moving those statistics in another direction, the silver lining is that we can do stuff about this, and that's what we're going to talk through now. So, individuals with autism, generally speaking, obviously this doesn't apply to everybody, but generally speaking have an increased risk of drowning.
a decreased ability to perceive risk and danger. They're often excluded from services and activities, and therefore they don't have the opportunity to benefit from the therapeutic benefits and the joy of the water, and members of the community aren't aware that they fall into the high risk category and therefore don't really understand that they have a role to play, and that's in terms of wandering and drowning. This is the impact we would like to have, or like to think that we have, and that's that parents receive support in terms of wandering and drowning prevention. Swimming instructors or aquatic therapists are certified to teach most effectively. The community knows their role in keeping individuals safe, as well as how to be more inclusive, and the individuals themselves learn how to thrive and survive in the water. So accidental drowning accounted for approximately 90% of total deaths for children under 14 subsequent to wandering between 2009 to 2011. 50% of children with autism attempt to escape from a safe environment, which is what wandering is, also known as elopement or absconding, and that's a rate which is nearly 4 times higher than children without autism. Move on. I know I need to skip some. Let's talk about why. Wandering, which we will talk about more shortly. Generalisation. So this refers to the ability to transfer skills and information learned in one setting to other settings, people and activities. So we work a lot with individuals who actually are quite competent swimmers in the pool with their swimming instructor. But the moment they're in a different environment or with a different person, they can't transfer those skills over. So all of a sudden, it's like as if their brain loses the ability to remember everything they've just been working on and the skills that they've developed. So that's where things like nippers plays a really great role, in that it's actually giving the participants exposure to different bodies of water. A lack of specialised services. So many swimming teachers may have undertaken additional training in what are referred to as special needs courses. However, until recently, nothing has been specific to autism, and those courses aren't, they're not particularly practical. So there's a need for teachers to understand the ways in which individuals with ASD process information and acquire new skill sets. There's also the need to incorporate components of water safety into the lessons. So traditional swimming lessons are learn to swim, whereas autism swim lessons are threefold. They're water therapy, water safety, and learn to swim. So we feel like you can really only make the gains that are needed if you're targeting those 3 areas. Lack of awareness. So the data also show that only 50% of parents of children with ASD have received advice about wandering prevention from a professional. Sadly, many in our community are unaware that wandering is even an issue, or that drowning is such a high risk factor for individuals with autism. I was having a conversation with somebody earlier about the community's role, and that many individuals with autism wander, but it's also very common in dementia and some other neurological conditions. And what often happens is members of the community see somebody and something about the situation doesn't seem right. So, there's somebody there in their pajamas at 11 o'clock at night, no shoes on, it's a child. Something about the situation doesn't seem right, but I'm not really sure what to do, so they don't action anything. Or for some, they might go up to that individual and say, "Hi mate, you look lost, is everything okay?" And that individual has difficulty with reciprocal language, or may even be non-verbal, doesn't answer, and then they go, "Oh, well, you mustn't want to talk to me." So members of the community have a huge role to play in wandering prevention, but more often than not, they don't even know what wandering is, let alone what to do in that particular situation. So a big part of our role is to educate the community. I've already touched upon difficulties with perceiving risk and danger. Just because things have been a little bit heavy until this point.
Yeah. Because she's part of the special AS Autism swim team. Yeah.
Like we've got our shirts.
Yeah.
Amazing. You had to stop then because I was cracking up laughing. Alright, let's have a little bit more of a chat about wandering, which as I mentioned is also referred to as elopement, fleeing or absconding. And it's a tendency for an individual to try to leave the safety of a responsible person's care or a safe area, which has the potential to result in harm or injury. It's not uncommon for individuals with autism to become overstimulated with crowds, noises, and a range of other stimuli, and hence they escape this by retreating to another environment. However, that's not the only reason as to why wandering occurs. Many individuals with autism gravitate toward bodies of water because they associate water with alleviating many of their sensory needs. Many individuals with autism go under the water because it's their happy place, but they don't actually know to come back up to the surface, which is very scary. Sometimes the intent from the person wandering is that they're trying to get away, so it's an escape response. However, for others, there is no intent or recognition of that social and spatial part of wandering. There's an implicit social understanding that I should stay close to a caregiver, or I understand space well. So for instance, I might not really understand that the distance between Sean and I is probably about 2 to 3 metres. To me, that could be 100 metres or it could be 5 centimetres. I'm not quite sure how to judge that. On top of wanting to escape or difficulties with social and spatial understanding, there may also be the curiosity factor, which is embedded in all children, and the want to explore. Some other areas that, some other functions that wandering plays, getting to a favourite place or area or item of interest, like the train station. For many individuals with autism, they pass a particular body of water, so let's just say it's a pond or a river as part of their daily route to school, and that stays in their heads. So when they find an opportunity, they're like, that's exactly where I'm going back to. Interaction from being chased. So a fairly good indicator of that, I work with many littlies like this who will run, they will bolt, but every now and then they look over their shoulder just to make sure that you're hot on their tail, which tells us that there may very well be an interaction component. But what's difficult is you can't exactly say, we'll just stop chasing after them and that will wear off, because it's not always that easy. You become very fit very quick. Avoiding something in their environment like large crowds or loud noise, trying to escape or avoid a situation like academic or social demands at school. 58%, I guess this ties in a little bit with your message, that 58% of parents of children with autism report wandering as the most stressful of autism behaviours. More recently, 2 different types of elopement have been identified. One is bolting, so that's when it's rapid and goal-directed movement. And 2, wandering, which is moving about without a clear course or destination. So just having a bit of a stroll, something might be over there that I'm interested in. Sometimes it looks a little bit like pacing. In addition to drowning, wandering obviously brings with it other high-risk factors, including but not limited to exposure to the elements, dehydration, falls, hypothermia, traffic injuries, encounters with strangers, and encounters with law enforcement. When do we think wandering is most likely to happen?
Anytime.
Well, that is true. That's not the answer I was looking for, but it is true. Anytime. There are some certain criteria under which the risk increases, though.
When they're out of home.
Yeah, unfamiliar settings. Right.
Also, if they're overstimulated too.
Yeah, so if they're feeling overstimulated, yeah, for sure. So during warmer months, visits to non-home settings, such as friend's house or when on holidays, during family gatherings, and during times of stress or escalation, which may cause individual to flee or wander. The last study that was undertaken, the same one where the stats come from, 23% of children who died following a wandering incident were in the care of someone other than a parent. So to flip that, 80% were in the care of their parent. What often happens at these family gatherings is that we have this deflection of responsibility, whereby the more people that are in a room, the more we feel reassured and we think, oh, there's 60 people here, somebody got their eye on Tommy. And the reality is those 60 people are all saying the same thing. So it gives us this false sense of security. Whereas what we do recommend in those particular situations is actually always having a designated watcher. And when your time is up, somebody else becomes that designated watcher. So you just learn not to deflect that responsibility. In terms of where the drownings are happening, 52% in ponds, 13% in rivers and 13% in lakes. Notice that pools and beaches don't even feature there. And again, that reiterates my point about generalisation in that many individuals with autism wouldn't actually have had any exposure to swimming in those particular bodies of water. The average distance, this is a scary one, the average distance from home where the drownings occurred was only 290 metres. 3/4 of the drowning incidents occurred in the afternoon hours, and wandering occurred before the drowning in 74% of the incidents. I promise you not every slide is just stats, but we do like the stats, don't we? All right, most importantly, what can we do? It is without bias that positive behaviour support comes first. In terms of anything to do with positive behaviour support, the notion is that in terms of effectively applying any strategies, you have to understand the why first. So if somebody came onto my books and said, look, Sally punches people in the face, what can we do about it? I would say, well, nothing, until I understand exactly why Sally's punching people in the face. So wandering is no different. It still sits under the umbrella of a behaviour of concern, and we need to understand the function of it. This is when we introduce the notion of ABC. A is antecedent. So what was happening before the incident occurred? Who was around? What was happening in the environment? Was a request made? Can you identify a possible function? That might be very clear to you. You might be like, yep, he's definitely on the way to the train station. Or I accidentally turned the music up really loud and he ran away. Sometimes it's really clear, and at other times you have absolutely no idea about what was going on before that could have acted as a potential antecedent. But over time, when you start to document things, that's when you start to understand patterns. Behaviour. What did the behaviour actually look like? What was objectively observed? So is he running? Is she walking? Is she looking over her shoulder? There's all these little details that may seem insignificant to you at the time, but in the greater picture, they're very, very, very relevant in working out why something's happening. And the last one, which is perhaps the most overlooked, is consequence. So how is the behaviour responded to? How is the person supported? Did anything change as a result of the behaviour occurring? How we respond to an incident has the ability to reinforce it occurring. And this is something that people don't often think about. An example that might ring true to some people is the notion of timeout. So let's just say you've got little Jimmy in your swimming lesson who's full of beans, let's say full of beans, but being a little bit disruptive, right? And you say, all right, time out, 5 minutes. It very well could be the case that he did not want to be in that lesson. You were giving him demands he didn't want. He just wanted to do his own thing. So you've given him 5 minutes time out, which is actually his preference. And so you think that you've applied a consequence, but ultimately all you've done is reinforce the behaviour. You've taught him, no worries, mate, all you have to do is hit a few people with the noodle and you can get what you want. So it's something that often people will look at behaviours and go, what was happening before, what did it look like? But they don't often think about the fact that what we're doing in response to behaviour could very well be increasing the rate of it happening. I worked with a family recently who came onto our books for wandering. I spent some time in the family. The child would run away, the parents would run after them, and then when they got to them and grabbed them, they'd hold them on the ground and tickle them. And be like, no, you're not allowed to do that, no running. There we go. So reinforcing it like that became a game to that individual. So consequence, as I said, very often overlooked, but plays a really vital role in any behaviour support, not just wandering. In terms of positive behaviour support, behaviours generally fall into one or multiple of 4 categories. Does anybody here have come from a background or had experience with positive behaviour support that wants to have a stab at what one of them might be? No? Okay, tangible. So my behaviour serves as a way of communicating that I want something. I want to run into the water, and when denied this, I'm just going to run in the opposite direction then toward the water. So my behaviour serves as a way of communicating that I want something. 2, escape. So the behaviour serves as a way to avoid or escape something. Your child may be overstimulated or stressed, so wanders away from the environment he or she is finding aversive. 3, interaction. So the behaviour gains a type of interaction that the individual may be looking for. Often it doesn't matter if the interaction is positive or negative. So an individual might do something and you go, no, I said stop. And they're like, yes, this is great. Change of voice, you know, gestures, their face is getting a bit red. It's that notion of poking the bear. So people don't often look at interaction in the light that sometimes negative is what we're looking for, because I was bored, I was understimulated, this is great. Keep going, and often the harder you push, the more reaction you get, and we're stepping back into that world of a maintaining consequence. I don't like the term for attention, because even if it is interaction based, it's representing an unmet need. And I already gave the example that many look over their shoulder just to make sure that the game's still happening. And the last one is sensory. So the behaviour may have sensory benefits to the individual. For example, the child may need the regulation benefits that wandering provides, so that notion of sort of pacing, yet he or she may not understand space or distance. So all of a sudden, she's 1 kilometre away, but that was never the intent. So that's positive behaviour support. Sometimes which function the wandering falls into is clear, other times it's not. Where it gets a bit tricky is often it falls into more than one category at once. If it's not clear to you, or even if it is, engaging a behaviour specialist will help with that process, somebody who's trained in positive behaviour support. So that's the first thing you can do, is understand why. Once we understand why, that's all very good and well, but we need to do something about it. So this is when we teach replacement skills. Once you understand why, you can then work out how to teach our little ones to communicate their needs in a better way than wandering, in a safer way, in a more effective way than wandering. A replacement behaviour must allow the person to gain access to the same reinforcing value that they receive through wandering. For example, if someone is wandering to gain access to a preferred item, for example, to find a garbage truck, the replacement behaviour must allow them access to garbage trucks in some regard, or something that they also find reinforcing. So if they're on a mission to go to the garbage truck and you offer a cup of tea, it's probably not going to hit the mark. We need to teach our little ones how to communicate what they want instead of wandering. Once we know what it is that we need to teach them, we then need to determine how to teach them. Everybody learns in a different way. But it will usually involve breaking the task into a series of small, achievable steps and following a task analysis type format. Task analysis is where we break down one task into smaller subtasks and then determine the level of prompting required at each sub-step. So an example of that might be that we're going to teach the individual how to use Prolo Quota Go or some sort of communication app on their iPad to indicate what they want, but they may have never used that app before. So we can't go, oh, well, we gave it 2 weeks and he just wasn't really into it, because he doesn't actually know how to use Prolo Quota Go on the app. So it's our job then to facilitate that skill development in a way that is most conducive to the ASD brain. Teach skills in controlled, safe environments first when the person is calm. So don't teach somebody to come back to you if running away is what they do at the beach. Start in your backyard, somewhere controlled, build that skill set up, and then you can look at something a little bit more in control. Ensure that the skill is practiced in different settings and with different people to assist with generalisation, and most importantly, practice, practice, practice. It is particularly important to teach safety skills to people with a tendency to wander. Teaching these skills can be prioritised according to the types of risky situations a person is most likely to come across if they wander. Some of these include road safety, stranger danger, who can help me if I'm lost, and water safety and water survival techniques. Examples include looking at a book or cartoon about garbage trucks instead of leaving the house to look at the garbage trucks. Providing reinforcement for a period of time whereby the individual does not wander, so some sort of reinforcement schedule. Providing regularly scheduled visits to preferred locations. So so let's just say we see somebody attempting to go out the front door because they're trying to get to the circus. what we need to do is make sure they're getting the surface at other times, embed that into a visual schedule so it's no longer you have to wander away to get what you want. We have a look on the schedule and we say, using active listening, you want to go to the circus. Ah, excellent, we're going to the circus tomorrow. How amazing. Now let's go do some colouring in. So actually giving that person opportunities to get what they want so they don't have to wander to get it. And teaching the individual to ask or signal for a break when they feel overwhelmed. Then we move into the sometimes controversial world of restrictive interventions. Now, I can give you a broad overview of what some of these are, but I'm certainly not telling you to go out and get these. I'm suggesting that if you think they have a role in your life, seek support from an occupational therapist or a clinician who can help guide which of these might be the right one for you. I certainly believe that tracking devices have a role for some individuals with autism, but again, that's a fairly broad subject area, so it's about what's the right option for your little one. A common restrictive intervention is known as environmental restraint, which prevents free access to parts of a person's environment, such as locking or placing alarms on doors. When implementing any restrictive practice, careful consideration needs to be given to the rights of your child, the plan to fade, etc., and consulting an OT or a behaviour specialist is necessary. So in terms of a restrictive practice, generally there always has to be some sort of plan for how you're going to fade that restrictive practice. So it's unlikely you'll get funded for things for a super long period of time. They might say, look, we'll fund you for 12 months, but we want to see in that 12 months that there's been some sort of progress in terms of fading the need for this. So here are some examples in terms of outdoor technology, CCTV cameras to assist in identifying how and where your child may have absconded from or which direction they may have travelled. Boundary fence lasers will alert you when someone has crossed or blocked the receptor for laser on the boundary fences. Indoor tech alarm systems, so an alert is sounded when the connection of the monitored door or stairs is broken, alerting you to a possible exit. Tracking bracelets, which I've mentioned, so you can connect your smart devices and actually track where your child is. Safety locks, various types are available for internal or external doors and windows. Deadlocks require keys to open. Restricted window openings, bolts to secure your windows from opening past a certain distance, and crimp-safe wire doors and window flywires made from tough mesh makes it almost impossible to be destroyed to exit. Okay, now we're going to move on to, I'm actually really on time. I'm so
doing well.
This is not like me. I can finish early. I just slow down a bit. There will be time for questions after I've finished. So if you've got a question, just write it down, because what we know is if you try and remember that, you won't retain anything else that I'm saying. So write it down, get it out of your head, and there will be an opportunity to ask questions. That's the wandering side of things. Now we're going to have a quick chat about drownings, and that might seem a little bit, unnecessary, but it actually blows my mind how much people don't know about drownings. And when I say, tell me what you think it looks like when someone drowns, people say, oh, they put their hand up and they call out for help. Whereas the reality is we're physiologically unable to do that. So we're going to cover a couple of points now on drownings. So the reality is that the waving, splashing and yelling that dramatic conditioning, television, prepares us to look for is very rarely seen in real life. Drowning is almost always a deceptively quiet event. That being the case, would you know if someone was drowning right in front of you? This is referred to as the instinctive drowning response. Except in rare circumstances, drowning people are physiologically unable to call out for help. So they're already unable to do it, but couple that with the fact that they may have limited verbal skills to begin with. The mouths of drowning people are not above the surface of the water long enough for them to exhale, inhale, and then call out for help. Drowning people cannot wave for help. Nature instinctively forces them to extend their arms laterally and press down on the water's surface. They cannot voluntarily control their arm movements. So those that are struggling on the surface of the water cannot stop drowning and perform voluntary movements such as waving for help, moving toward a rescuer, or reaching out for a piece of rescue equipment. So that's all very good and well if somebody's just feeling a little bit unsafe or a little bit worried, but if they can reach out for a pool noodle, things like that. But if they've actually started the process of drowning, they're not able to do that. From beginning to end of the instinctive drowning response, people's bodies remain upright in the water with no evidence of a supporting kick. Unless rescued by a trained lifeguard, these drowning people can only struggle on the surface of the water for 20 to 60 seconds before submersion occurs. Videos are not working. So what should you look out for? Head low in the water, mouth at water level. Head tilted back with mouth open. Eyes glassy and empty, unable to focus. Eyes closed, hair over forehead or eyes, not using legs and they're actually vertical in the water. So it often looks like somebody's just doggy paddling, which is why it's misunderstood. Hyperventilating or gasping, trying to swim in a particular direction but not making headway, trying to roll over on the back, appear to be climbing an invisible ladder. We know that being able to swim is not a safeguard against drowning, particularly if your swimmer has a cognitive delay. So we have a wandering and drowning prevention toolkit, which helps to mitigate the risk, but there's some stuff in the toolkit which you can action straight away without having the toolkit. So the most prominent thing that I can probably get you to walk away thinking that's a priority for you is some sort of wandering action plan. You don't want your child to have to wander to then go, wow, we were really not prepared for that at all. You can give that wandering action plan to people in your community. For instance, 5 people in your community know exactly what to do if your child wanders. So the neighbour's going to pick up your other child from school. This particular neighbour is checking this particular waterway. Your brother-in-law is checking this particular waterway. You've got the police snuffer on hand. So just try and think about it. It's never a pleasant thing to think about, but you will regret not thinking about it just because of the fact it was unpleasant and you bumped it down the priority list. So think about now, worst case scenario, a wandering action plan, and get yourself organised for what people can do in that particular situation. I'm done. 7:05. Sped ahead. That allows more time for questions, which I think is the plan now. Question time.
We're going to do question time now, or we're going to have the panel later. What do you want to do?
Oh, well, I know right now. You're really ahead of schedule.
I know.
My name is Denise, so I'm one of the relationship managers with Sean at Sporting Red. Can I ask, I actually have one of my wonderful SSAs at State Sporting Association's baseballs just here, doing, may I say, amazing work in the autism area. They're doing really, really well. Should sporting bodies also have a wondering, if they've got autistic children, should they have a wondering plan?
Yes.
Yeah.
I mean, I could answer that in an hour, but I can answer it in one word, yes. I think everybody should. With the stats showing us that 50% of individuals wander, again, it's always best to be preventative. So that's considering things like, what does your entry and exit to the building look like? Who is your designated watcher? If somebody has a propensity to wander, chatting with mum and dad about how they manage that at home and what are the wins and what goes terribly wrong in that particular situation. Again, developing an understanding of it, and then having some safeguards in place, because it could all be well that that particular support person understands that individual well and understands the behaviour well, but what happens tomorrow when they're off sick and there's somebody who didn't even know that wandering is likely to happen, has no idea what it is or what to do in that particular situation. So you can never be too prepared, in my opinion.
Thank you.
Any other questions?
It's not so much a question as such, to know how to explain that to people, if you get what I mean. So, thank you.
That's so nice. Well done for being, I mean, that is not an easy feat.
No, it wasn't.
And I will never ever proclaim to be an expert, because whilst I've been doing this for 10 years and know a bit, I can assure you there's more that I don't know, and that we as specialists don't know. And so the more parents we talk to, the more stories we hear. You know, it's every day I go, wow, I never would have thought that. That's, you know. So the more parents like you that come to events like this and say, this is my story, helps people like me, and in turn helps the community. So whilst I appreciate it, thank you, I'm going to throw it right back at you. And thank you for being here, and thank you for saying thank you also, because it's
That's okay. Well, that's what inspired me to be a swim teacher. He loved water, and he was a great drowning risk as well, because he had no idea how to do it. So while he was young, I just did what I thought was natural to teach him how to be safe in water. But then, because I couldn't work for so long, because of his behaviours and all that kind of stuff, it took me a while to find what worked for me. So then, at his school, they built a pool for themselves, and I just volunteered in the pool, and kind of got the gist of how the teachers did it. And then someone said, "Go and do your swim because you've got it," type thing. So I did that. I loved it. I did the access and inclusion course. I think that can be done better. I hope I don't offend anybody in saying that, but I really strongly believe that more can be done through Autism.
Well, we've actually partnered with Autism.
I know.
So
love that.
in their defence, they recognise they can't address every population group in one. So what they've said is, we'd rather give everybody a broad overview and then give them a clear path for where to go to specialise. So you're actually not alone. Many parents we work with were in the same position where they couldn't find the right instructor fit, decided to embark on their own journey. And teaching swimming, in my opinion, is a billion times easier than, understanding how to teach swimming is a billion times easier than understanding how to work with those who have complex needs. So, and then parents often say, well, it ended up being like the greatest career path ever that I never would have thought was an option for me. So, a lot to that.
I was denied the opportunity to get my son into one-on-one lessons, because I was always charged $60+ for the whole class type thing. So couldn't afford that. That was just unrealistic. So had to fight through swimming lessons for him in groups. Not easy, but we did it. And again, that kind of inspired me to ask my boss where I was working, are there preschoolers with special needs? Is there a demand for that? Because I can work school hours, I can only do that type of thing. So she said, you have no idea how much demand there is out there. So, I opened the door up to have kids come in, and within 2 months I had 2 full shifts of kids coming to do swimming with me.
And you're still doing that?
I am still doing it, and I love it. It's my happy place.
There needs to be more of you in the world.
And I'll say, Autism, I think, we work closely with a lot of sporting groups, and Sport and Rec Victoria were the first ones to say, we can do better, of course. And so I think this is the first step in many, and I think in a really long relationship with groups, but also with the community as well.
Yes, definitely. I'm not saying they don't do it bad.
No, we all do.
What I'm saying is, I think because the autism community is so growing on a rapid rate, I think they have a responsibility to do a little bit more specific to that community, as opposed to broaden it with cold and old people and all that kind of stuff. So having an individualised course, or even professional development, where you can just learn about how people, because they learn so differently as well. Even though they've got autism, they all learn different ways as well. Not everyone learns the same way whether they've got autism or not. So, it's just that removing that stigma, removing that that block, that big barrier that's there, and humanising in that respect.
Thank you so much. We've had a very patient person with another question.
No, it's not a question. 2 years ago, I had the opportunity eventually to work with a group of autistic young adults you know, running actually makes his autism worse. Okay. Stop. Is what I have to say to the kid now. Is, okay, come back, stand still, to stop that autistic behaviour. And in that 2 years, I've learned a lot with this group of young adults. And one of the biggest things was the parents said, can you do more communication? Sure thing. So it's working with the parents as well as with the kids to understand what works, what doesn't, and to understand them better. And they're probably the most fascinating group that I actually have, that I work with.
Yeah, there's a notion I recently got introduced to, which was called the autism bug. And somebody said, oh yeah, and 4 years ago I caught the autism bug, and I said, oh, what does that mean? They said, oh, it's just where you just think it's the most fascinating, greatest thing, and you just live and breathe it, and you just want to learn everything about it. And I was like, I've got that. And then you start to chat with people, and you know, it's a very interesting world, and sometimes it is just what you choose to live and breathe because of that.
Yeah.
But that's awesome. Sounds like you're doing a really great job.
Yeah, they're fun groups to work with.
Yeah.
Can I just jump in? So, in terms of being able to encourage parents, I work at a leisure centre in the close program, and we have a lot of parents or a lot of kids that we have through our program that don't disclose that they have ASD or learning disabilities. How can we assist that? Because it's really hard to encourage parents to come forward, being a trust issue and all that sort of things. How can we go approaching that?
I feel like I'm dominating the conversation. Do you want to have
It might be a question. It might be a question for both of you.
Well, I mean, I have some ideas, but we might see if you've got them.
Well, one of the frameworks that I know is that if you can build a program for, I guess, someone with autism, or put in policies or procedures or work for autism, then you're covering basically every disability and every inclusion. So for me, it's I think parents have a right to not to they've got the right to keep that information to themselves. But with a policy framework that says we're an inclusive centre or inclusive practice, and we're making progress to training our staff to be aware of not just autism but disabilities and how an inclusive practice works, I think you're well on your way. And there's times when I think you can identify that there might be a person with an additional need, and if you've got, I guess, a level of training, you might go, well, that person might have autism, or that person might have selective mutism, or they might have something else, and I can just, rather than quickly going there, ignoring me, I can sort of maybe follow a protocol. So I think it also comes from an organisation level to bring that in.
And I think you have to remember that many of the families we work with have been excluded from services because their child has autism. So you can sort of understand why they may be a little bit reluctant at times to put that information forward. But I guess the idea is that once your staff become better versed in terms of autism and other abilities and supportive practices, it doesn't actually matter. And you'll be able to go, okay, I now understand that that child, irrespective of what's on their enrolment form, is a visual learner. And I understand the utility that visuals have, and I actually have visuals, so I'm going to get out a visual board and see if that works. Or they're not cooperating, okay, what's the reinforcing value in this lesson? What do they care about? What carrot can I dangle? Hang on, how am I actually giving the instruction? Has that got something to do with it? So I guess the idea is after a while you start to look at what the characteristics are of the individual, which may or may not be an autistic feature, but that your staff go, okay, well, I know what to do in terms of, I understand that better now and I know what to do about it.
As you said, it comes to understanding why. Whether it's a person with autism or not, knowing that why. Yeah.
I would say there's things that I would really, really, really hope people disclose. Things like peanut allergies, anaphylaxis, EpiPens, and then, as Kieran said, it's kind of up to the family whether they disclose or not. It's their right not to, but as Eric alluded to, you can ask some questions. If you run after that person, they're just going to keep running. But if you use a short, concise stop, they will stop. And that's really important to have maybe an individual profile We might take a 5-minute break. There are more sandwiches. Thank you to Chris and the team here at LSB. We've got a beautiful room. So let's take a quick 5-minute break and we'll come back for Lana, and then we'll have the 3 speakers together for a Q&A. So if you had questions, very sorry, hold on to them. We'll come back for more Q&A.
So now I want to move on to some advice for everyone. So ideal qualities in a coach, especially for a coach who does teach people with autism. Patience and respect, 2 of the biggest ones I think are very important. You need to be able to be patient with your students, even if they aren't learning at the same fast rate that you expect them to, because that's not always going to happen, even with neurotypical students as well. So to make sure that you're being patient and keeping up with their own abilities and their needs as opposed to what you expect. And also that respect. I find that if you respect your pupil, then they are much more likely to respect you, and your relationship is a lot better that way. And the learning is a lot better that way as well. If I learn a lot better from a person that I respect and I admire than someone who I don't respect and I don't like. But a willingness to offer extra help and support, not just to autistic swimmers as well. I think something that most people don't seem to know is that a lot of the changes that can be made to support autistic learners actually really benefit neurotypical learners as well. And a lot of the desired attributes and changes that parents and therapists want to better support that autistic child will do the same for neurotypicals. So things like, learning something a different way, or having it explained differently, or those sorts of things can really benefit everyone, but most especially autistic students. Modifications, really, really, really important. I'm going to keep coming back to this part. Modifications are so important, because often most things aren't designed with autistic people in mind. They're designed for neurotypicals, and that's not always an environment that will benefit the learning of a person on the spectrum. But something to keep in mind about modifications is it needs to suit the individual, not the diagnosis. There's this really great quote, I can't remember who said it, but knowing one person with autism means you know one person with autism. If you looked at myself and my 2 younger siblings, we're all on the spectrum, but our needs and our the ways we need to be supported are so vast and so different. Because despite having the same diagnosis, it's a really broad spectrum, and people with autism will not ever have the same needs and requirements. So to move on to my next point, you need to be able to be flexible with those modifications and be willing to change and adjust to the needs of the individual. That's something that is really key to keep in mind. And lastly for this slide, something that I keep preaching because I think it's really important is to perfect a calm facade. Say you've had a really terrible day, work is just not going well, something's happened in your family, and you're just in the worst mood possible, and you've had to go and teach this autistic child, who, of course, in this day is having a meltdown. You need to be able to find whatever acting skills you have deep inside and perfect that calm facade, because it is not going to help at all if you start getting angry and lashing out and yelling and raising your voice. Often the autistic child in question won't actually know what they've done wrong. It's a really key thing. So if you're getting frustrated and upset, it's just going to exacerbate the situation and make it 10 times worse. So something that's really good to have in any sort of coach or teacher or someone working with children on the spectrum is to perfect that calm facade and keep a steady and calm demeanour, because that's going to connect so much better to the child in question, and it's going to make it so much easier. Hang on, I do have one last one that I put up there because I forgot about it. Praise and rewards, really important. That helps build confidence and it helps to motivate the child in question as well. For my brother, to motivate and to get him to do things. So often we would reward him for doing something, and it doesn't have to be big. Like for example, if he didn't want to go to his swimming lessons because he was having a really awful day and he just was not happy to leave the house, we've motivated by saying, hey Flynn, how about if you go to this lesson for say 10 minutes, you can get a chocolate frog at the end. So it doesn't need to be a massive thing, just little rewards like that. It does actually build that motivation, and having that praise afterwards, going, oh, you know, well done, you've done so well, thanks for coming out here. That's going to make it a lot easier in the long run to get them to continue to go to the lessons. And that's not just for swimming as well. Autism itself is not an inhibitor on swimming ability. So if parents are fearful about them learning how to swim, you should not be blaming it on them being autistic. You know, it might just take a little bit more extra time and support, but again, autism itself is not an inhibitor to learning how to swim or learning how to do most of anything, really. Again, if parents are worried or fearful about their child in the water, something they could do is potentially conduct more research into places that teach swimming, and find the right teacher, being willing to communicate with said teacher, that's a really big thing. And just generally conducting that research and finding the right place for them. And also, perseverance is key. It might not work the first time. The first place you try might not be a good fit, you know, it just generally won't be the place for you. So continue looking for other centres and other teachers, and eventually you will find the right one. So persevere, keep trying new things. You won't always get it on the first try. It's really important to have that teacher-student connection. One of the ways that you can do that is by informing the teacher of the autistic person's special interest or focus, so that they can kind of use that to connect with the student in question and then to integrate into the class as well. So say if they've got a real interest in gaming or trains or Harry Potter or something, having the teacher find ways to integrate that into the lesson could be really crucial in their engagement and connection with the lesson. And then generally, if it's focused on their interests, they'll be more likely to want to do it as well. So it can be really good for that motivation factor. And last, but certainly not least, have confidence in your kids. Autism never stopped me, nor should it stop anyone else. Sometimes it just takes a little more support and help to get us there, but we will eventually do anything we put our minds to.
No hands up yet? Anyone up to sleep like me, or what's going on?
Across your three respective areas, what's been the biggest challenge you've had working in this area as a person that lives with autism, person that studies it, person that works with it every day?
You have some preparation for that.
I've got an answer for that. One of the biggest ones is ignorance. There's a lot of people who don't understand the specific needs of people with autism, especially in my case, because I'm very articulate and not to toot my own horn, I am very intelligent as well, so I don't come across as someone who's actually on the spectrum, and thus I don't appear to be someone who needs that extra help and extra support. So it can be very difficult to actually access that needed help because of the ignorance and the stigma against autism. So that's definitely one of the biggest problems I've faced, and in general my siblings have faced as well.
I would say from a research perspective, in making sure that we've included people with autism, I guess, in our study designs, and making sure that, I guess if we're coming out and studying or researching, that number one, it's an area that is important. It's just not a researcher going, oh, this is an interesting topic that I want to research, and I'll conduct some research. I think it's really important that we engage in that consultation process, and that we make sure that we're trying to add value back as well. So I guess from my perspective is making sure that that's included. So that's one of the challenges.
Every day's hard. I guess getting people to care about something that you care so much about and you're also passionate about, and parents of children with autism, swimming instructors, they might care, or people in the aquatics industry, people that have a direct correlation to the problem area or who directly get to see the benefits. But for those who don't, and it's not part of their day-to-day life operations, getting them to care and be passionate and realise that whether or not you know someone with autism, this is still something that you should know about and do something about, and that you have a role to play. So obviously I want everybody to care as much as I do, and that's not the reality, but Alicia's care a little bit.
I think Lex had a question.
Well, it wasn't so much a question, more of a comment. And probably don't need that.
Lex, pretty loud.
Can be loud. First of all, I really like to congratulate you on your speech. Why we're being quiet is because I think that you articulated, and I'll say before you go, you don't say for yourself, what we're all thinking. So it was the points that you raised, which were ones that I was, were going on in my mind, were about how teaching to a person, whether it be a child, adult, or anything with autism or anything else, is just really best practice teaching. It's about looking at an individual, looking at where they're at, letting them try and get to a point higher than that at each stage, and expecting them to make that achievable. It was another point you raised was about working as a team and networking, about understanding from friends, relatives, and whoever else is working with that individual, things about them. So that's why we're quiet. It's not that we haven't got questions, it's that you've raised them all and not really nailed it.
Yeah,
and it's from a personal perspective, it's really lovely to hear that coming from you as someone who is a young person who's been through the process of learning to swim, which is one of the things that I do as well as sort of other hats, and know that we're on the right track and we are doing the right thing and not being sort of patronising or making things up about how we think it should be done. And it's that working as a team together to do that. So thanks to all of you. And in terms of the wellbeing project, one of the that also interests me, when it came, was it a self-evaluation form that you used to get to that 70, or in terms of was it a K10 or
no? So
was the questionnaire and
yeah.
how it was adapted?
So it's the Personal Wellbeing Index, so it's not the K10, and for those that are wondering, K10 is a depression questionnaire. So it's a positively worded questionnaire. One of the used amongst the general population. It's been validated for adolescents and people with intellectual disability, and part of my research was to validate it for use amongst people with autism. I guess one of my missions now is to start educating health professionals that there is a tool that can be used that can capture a person's well-being, and it can also be used to evaluate if programs are being effective as well. And I sort of see the next step in regards to measuring well-being is that there's a lot of community organisations doing work, and we've got a very quick, easy tool that can go across into communities. We can capture the effectiveness of these programs, and then try and tie it back into policy. And I'll bug Sean as well about the effectiveness of this.
So, are we able to access that, or would we be able to access that further down the track? Would we, as a community organisation?
As a community,
or will we just go for health profession?
Let's talk afterwards. Yeah.
Oh, we got a couple.
I guess also to line on what you said about your comment about they can swim kind of thing, like absolutely nothing about autism stops them from learning how to swim. I absolutely agree, and I think the courses that we're doing at the moment, especially with Autism, it's all about what they can't do and what stops them from doing what needs to be done
that perception of autism from something that's negative and stigmatized to something that's positive and strength-based, which is what the ICANN network is actually really great for. When I was younger, after I first got my diagnosis, because I learned about it immediately, I didn't like the fact that I was autistic. I was actually very negative and very downtrodden about my diagnosis because I didn't want it. I didn't want to be different from the other kids. And so it was a very long journey to change that perception from this is a terrible thing, you know, I'm different, I can't do things because I'm autistic, to no, these are actually my strengths because I'm autistic, and being on the spectrum is actually a good thing. Look at all the things I can actually do better than my peers as a result. So it's that kind of changing the mentality and the perception of autism that is so crucial and so important.
We have a question in the front.
This is a question more towards Erica. So, do you ever get
It's pretty loud as well.
Yeah, it's fine.
Good acoustics in the
I
room.
think
Sorry.
you go to sleep, then, shouldn't I?
I've been up since 4 a.m. So
I am, yeah. Drunk up tomorrow too, Jesus, telling me.
Do you ever get like comments like from people that come to you about pools at their own home, that they're afraid of actually having pools like in their backyard, and do they get like confidence from yourself to like have pool fencing around? Do you ever get like comments about that or not really?
We've got a lot of parents who feel like lessons are only going to take place successfully in their backyard pool because those modifications that were talked about are a lot easier managed. So you go to a council pool and you say, oh wow, I need to dim these lights, and they're like, sorry, it doesn't work like that. So sometimes families are opting more to sometimes custom build or at least make modifications to what they've got and know that it's in a controlled setting. There's a lot more instructors becoming mobile for that reason, and working in the individual safe, happy place instead of sending them to somewhere foreign and having to sort of start that desensitization process from the beginning when everything else is new. It's a new person, it's new everything. At least there's one familiar thing. So it's less about, I guess, things like fencing's more to do with regulations, but certainly what we do is consult on how to make those environments a little bit more friendly, if that answers your question. Yeah.
Just into the line.
Yeah.
I'm relatively new to this thing and basically trying to figure it out. We're certainly having challenges with the parents more so than the children. You mentioned that obviously kids with autism can do anything. Was there times where you wanted to do things and mum and dad were not so thrilled with it? And how did you convince them that it was something that you couldn't do?
Yeah, generally my parents are very supportive, so most of that, no, you can't do it, is in regards to me and my brother climbing up the roof one day. You know, that sort of thing where it's not appropriate for any child. Or, you know, I wanted a pony like every other girl, where it's like, no, Lana, you can't have a pony. Yeah, so I've been really lucky in that my parents are very supportive of my decisions, and if they can make it happen because it's feasible and not just some sort of whim on my part, they will do their best to make it happen. So yeah, I don't really know how to answer that question because I don't have the personal life experience to say, well, this is what I've always wanted, but my parents said, no, you can't, because I've been really fortunate in that my parents have never really adopted that attitude with me. Definitely a lucky one.
One last question. Anyone have a burning question?
I was wondering, in your eyes, places like recreation centres, community centres, or even places, say, even like schools, are reaching accessibility standards for people with autism? And if they could change, how would you recommend changes?
Is anyone happy to answer accessibility standards? In Victoria, we have the Victorian Equal Opportunity Act, and Sport and Rec Victoria, we would would see access to sport and recreation as a human right. Access to culturally significant aspects of life is a human right. And so we hope that we can throw open the doors of every sport and rec and every single sport around. At the same time, we want to do it responsibly in a way that people are safe and they are well looked after, and at the same time that we support the staff, that they feel confident that they can support someone maybe with cerebral palsy or someone in a wheelchair. They know how to support someone from the poolside into the pool, or somebody who needs a sensory-friendly environment. As Lana said, we can't take away that crazy smell of chlorine, but perhaps we can. We can have some outdoor pools, and we can have some saltwater pools, and we can have pools that are a different base, possibly magnesium-based pools. And so I think that I don't think anyone are breaching accessibility standards per se, but I would say that we can improve and we can make all environments a little bit more welcoming, maybe of women and girls, called Aboriginal, people of any physical ability and people of any cognitive ability. We can all get to the next level, I think. I'll take that policy one off you guys.
I think to continue that argument, the best way to do that is through education. And events like these where we're shedding light on knowledge and issues that people don't have enough understanding in, and it's all about removing that ignorance and destabilizing the stigma that surrounds issues like these. So education is the biggest way to change things for the better.
I think sometimes people have the right intention, they just don't really know where to go next. So we might approach a surf life saving club and say, we've got loads of kids in your area who want to do nippers, but they need it to be somewhat modified, and they might say, oh my goodness, fantastic, we've been wanting to do that for 5 years, we just didn't really know what the next step was. So a lot of the time I think there's great intentions and people realise that inclusion and accessibility is the way of the future and they want to be a part of that. They might just need a little bit of help in steering the ship in terms of the fact that there is support out there, it's just where to get it.
I see it as giving people the confidence. Once they've got the confidence.
Also the capability too. Like I know with other issues outside of swimming that we've had promises of change and beautiful platitudes, but they were empty. Because they didn't have the capability, they didn't have the knowledge, and often they didn't have the funding either. That's always a really major issue. So it's changing those sorts of things, unfortunately, that will actually lead to proper and lasting changes for the better.
Yes.
Is there any way you would recommend just for buying like visual aids and that for supporters?
Oh, I don't want to give you the hard sell, but the answer is autismswim.com.au. If you jump on our website, there's a shop tab, then there's a resources tab. Again, don't want to give you the hard sell, but if you become Autism Swim approved, you get those for free. So, yeah.
Will you throw in a free autograph copy as well? Or
You and I will chat after about that.
Was there a question at the back?
Just, have you done any work with I'm so loud. Yeah, hi. Have you done any work with first responders? So, for example, lifeguards. And if so, or even if you haven't, what would be some advice from each of you in regards to, let's think worst case scenario and not being prepared?
Yeah, so
we're leveraging off the Autism Swim program.
Yeah, so we've got one in development, which is very exciting, and it covers things like, let's just say the lifeguard's giving an instruction and that person's not responding to the instruction, what to do. What if they need to do a rescue but that person hates being touched? So all of the things that lifeguards probably may not think about because they don't work in the industry, and saying these are the things that could possibly happen and this is what to do in those particular situations. I mean, in an ideal world, If somebody's accessing, let's say it's an aquatics facility, the person on the front desk has training. The actual instructor has training, the lifeguard has training. Everybody's at least got a few bits and pieces up their sleeve for if things were to go wrong, also how to make things go right. So that will be available soon, and we are in consultation with people on the spectrum as well as lifeguards in terms of what does a typical day look like and what can we include in that. But it's very much built off our platform that already exists. Yeah.
And if Kieran had his way, it would all be in virtual reality. And Kieran's also a CFA volunteer, but he's also a keen virtual reality person.
Virtual reality and artificial intelligence are a few of the side projects in the pipeline. So, yeah.
I just don't want to put a stop to the questions, but one last question.
Can I just have one?
Yes, please.
Not a question, just a statement. Yes. If there's any way that you want to help autistic people and parents, it's also in the playgrounds. If you go past a playground that is not fenced, write it down and go to your council about it to fence it. Because absconding is real, it's terrifying, it's dangerous, and it cannot be helped no matter what happens for a mother. And these organic, open play settings that we all love and think are magnificent are absolutely terrifying for a mother of an autistic child. And therefore, without that, we're trapping our kids. We don't have, we've got, each council might have 1 or 2 closed parked areas. They're the only ones that those parents can go to. And God forbid that's one child, what if she's got another one? What if I had my breastfeeding, I was breastfeeding my newborn and my 4-year-old autistic son ran out of McDonald's and went straight through into the car park, and that was in the McDonald's playground. And I looked up, there he was in the car park, it's like that. So, absolute safety, absolute teaching to swim, get them used to water. Stimming, water and stimming is huge with autism because they're soothing, and fence the playgrounds in the break. Thank God you've done some magnificent work here tonight.
Well, I had a closing statement, but it just won't be that good. Thank you. Well done. Ben, do you have any closing thoughts?
Yeah, I just wanted to thank you for the opportunity for doing this. I mentor that often I can in my reduced circumstances, but doing this is great. I haven't had a chance to talk to all of you. I'm sure if it was during the day we'd have a whole day together, we could just sit down and talk, and I just love meeting new people and just telling my story as well to anyone that's prepared to listen, because like what you said, we make a difference by talking about this kind of stuff. We need to talk. Don't put it under the carpet. If we put it under the carpet, we're not going to get our kids' hopes over at all. I'm 33 years old. None of this stuff existed when I was diagnosed. There's no such thing as funny. They used to say his name's up until now. Why is it? What's going on with me other? So, yeah. Thanks everyone.
So thank you all for taking all this time out of your Tuesday night. I hope that you can see the method in my madness. Coming from Sport and Rec Victoria, I feel like we had that opportunity to do something more than ball sports. As much as we all love footy, this is another level. We've heard from Erica that some children being under that water is their happy place. That pressure deep under the water is incredible. When I worked in Bermuda, I worked with 2 twins with autism, and we'd be in the ocean and they'd look at each other and like they just knew they could go separate directions. And I had to choose which one I could swim after fastest. But the water for them was their happy place, and they could be there for hours and hours. But of course, we wanted to be safe about it. I love what Lana said about the socialization within the swim group. It's activity-based swim socialization, but there's that breakup of the socialization, so there's no awkward pauses needed, so you get more breaks. And that leads to those personal connections, which I think, of course, Kieran's the expert on around well-being and quality of life. And I think that for me, it's not about kicking a weird-shaped ball through some sticks. It's not about racing a car in circles. It does come down to that quality of life and those personal connections we have. And so, thank you all. This isn't the end. This is only the beginning. So if you have any questions or comments, how we can make this better, I've asked everyone if you prefer podcasts or live things, live streams. So we'll keep working on this. And if there's topics you want in the future, please let us know. So, safe drive home.